Parents with nanny cams. What bizarre things have you caught your babysitter doing? I house a dog, sit for friends of my parents. The first time I did it, they mentioned they had a security camera by the front door that was motion activated, and I didn't really think anything of it. They were gone for a few weeks, they come home, their two giant huskies are happy, I get paid and all was well. A couple weeks later, my mom calls me laughing and laughing. My parents had dinner with the friends I dogs sit for, and they showed a video to my parents from the front door cam. Apparently, all it showed was me sprinting full speed down the hallway, a dog toy in hand, biggest stupid grin on my face, followed by the two huskies running and sliding after me, followed by me, followed by the huskies over and over and over and over again. I sit for them as often as I can. Story 2. Watched her outside playing with my dogs. She was dog sitting. Our yellow Labrador and golden retriever puppies started munching the blueberries right now off our blueberry bushes. They know damn well they're not supposed to get into the blueberry patch. We watched our dog sitter run over to them and try to get them to stop. She then ran inside and ran back out with a bowl. She proceeded to race the dogs for the blueberries. Had to be one of the highlights of our trip. We came home to a bowl of blueberries in the fridge and two very guilty puppers. Story 3. My story isn't that interesting, but I have a camera to check in on my rabbit when I'm not there. The biggest surprises were mostly just how almost nobody followed my pet sitting instructions. The one exception, ironically, was my brother who claimed to hate the rabbit and always wanted to get rid of it. I got an alert one day that my camera had detected movement while my bro was there taking care of him, and I decided to take a peek. I opened the app connected to the camera and saw my bro walk into my room, lay on the floor, and start playing with my rabbit. It just warmed my heart. Story 4. I dog sit for some neighbors, one of which told me she has a camera in the living room, dining room for her dogs. You know, those ones that dispense treats? Anyways, I thought it was a strange essential oil diffuser until she told me what it was. I was being paid to play with them for an hour, but she found out that I was actually staying for 2 or 3 hours. When she asked me about it, I think I said something like, "I'd want someone to do the same for my dog." Ever since then, she leaves me treats in the kitchen and even got me a Christmas present from the dogs. Story 5. Not a parent, but once caught the babysitter taking the baby's blanket, putting it around her neck like a small cape and flying around the room with it on. Keep in mind, the baby could only see out of the crib and was not present for the show. Needless to say, we found out she was often high during babysitting. Commenter: I got fired because of a nanny cam. I was working for a very rich, by Australian standards, family. The dad was a surgeon and he'd invented some kind of special surgical screw. Anyway, so I was 25, looking after their 5 children, all boys, age 17, 16, 11, 9, and then baby surprise, who was 3 years old. The 2 older kids obviously don't ever need me, and the 11 and 9-year-olds were really sweet and cute and didn't need that much. The toddler, though, just the worst kid I'd ever cared for. Really bratty and awful, but stopped short of torturing small animals. One day, we're stuck inside playing Star Wars Lego, and he's bossing me around and talking about the catwalkers we're building. I'm like, little dude, it's at for real. He cracked it, flipped over the fancy Lego table, told me he hated me, and ran downstairs. Being the consummate professional I am, I calmly flipped him off for 2 whole minutes before I went down and helped him cheer up. Next day, I was fired. Story 6. Not me, but my aunt's friend set up a nanny cam because she noticed that every time she changed her child's diaper, the child would start crying a lot more than usual. Turns out, when they watched the nanny change her diaper, she would use Clorox wipes if they were nearby instead of grabbing the baby wipes. They fired the nanny immediately, and the father became a stay-at-home dad. Story 7. Friends of ours don't have kids, but have dogs. They were going out of town and told the dog sitter about all of the cameras, including the one that is outside, but sometimes picks up reflections and will actively notify them of motion. The dog sitter seemed to get it, but she forgot to convey that to her boyfriend, who came out and walked around naked quite a bit. Commenter: my girlfriend's, now fiance's parents have security cameras. I used to pretend to not care much for my girlfriend's cat around other people. Then, when they were out of town, we took care of the dog and brought the cat over. They saw me on camera, holding the cat over my head and dancing softly in a circle while looking into his cat eyes. The jig was up. Story 8. I got a nanny cam to keep an eye out for my elderly grandfather, especially when the home aides were there. My grandfather started asking for lots of cash and couldn't remember what was happening to it. A brooch that my aunt was supposed to get disappeared. And then I heard reports of my grandfather being inappropriate with some of the home health aides. He was busted squirreling away his medication that he was supposed to be taking in his chair, giving money to an aide and harassing another aide. Story 9. Friend caught hers rummaging through her closet and stealing a blouse. She confronted her about it when she returned home, and the woman played innocent. She was wearing the ducking blouse. Story 10. We didn't have a nanny cam, but my mom set up the camcorder when she suspected our babysitter was stealing, and then caught the babysitter stealing. She returned most of the stuff when my mom threatened to report her to the police. I think she should still have reported her anyway. Now she probably just went on stealing at other people's places. Story 11. My family bought one to see our dogs when we leave on vacation twice a year. It's one where they can hear us, and we thought it'd be great. We hardly used it. We also asked our maid to dog sit for us while we were out. Once, when we looked at the feed, we saw the dog sitter there a solid 30 minutes early, just petting the dogs and playing with them. She's since retired from working, but she was the sweetest old lady, and we love her. Another time, my dad left a wad of cash on top of the washing machine, about $600, and she put a rubber band around it with a note saying he misplaced it. Story 12. I have caught her making pillow forts that are heavily resistant to the monsters that may or may not come out during heavy thunderstorms with my kiddo. 20 minutes after bedtime. Needless to, she was dealt with appropriately. Story 13. My uncle told me this once when a babysitter was holding his daughter, my older cousin, when she was a baby. The baby was playing with her toys, and she somehow swilled a small piece of something, and the babysitter performed the Heimlich. But for babies. There's a version of that for babies IDK where I found it, though. She saved my cousin, and her family was thankful. They have no idea where the babysitter is now, but right now she's supposed to be around her late 40s years. Story 14. I've been a pretty regular weekend nanny for an amazing family for 4 years now. They've cycled through a couple different weekday nannies since I've been with them. There is only one monitor, and it's in the little dude's room. Once the mom showed me on the camera why they let one go. Little dude said, "Mommy said I don't have to do that." And the nanny snapped back, "Well, it doesn't matter. Mommy's a git." And then dragged the kid out of the room by his shirt. Super fired. Story 15. We have a security camera in my bedroom for my free roam bunny so we can keep an eye on her whilst on work if we go on holiday ECT. Well, my dad is 50 and is a big bloke who acts like he doesn't like pets came over to visit one day whilst I was out. He went in my room and crouched down calling the bunny. He spent an hour trying to pet the rabbit and kept repeating in a soft voice, "I'm not going to hurt you, I just want to pet you and see how fluffy you are." He just about crapped himself when I spoke through the security camera to tell him she's very fluffy. Story 16. My buddy has a camera that sits on his doorstep. It has a motion sensor, and every time it detects someone or something on the porch, it snaps a photo and sends it to his phone. It's a Sunday morning, and for once, his 2-year-old isn't shouting into his bedroom to get him out of his crib. Yes, a rare morning to lay in bed. His phone goes off. A photo of a little red-headed boy reaching out of the front door to grab a package appears. And that's how he discovered that his son could get out of the crib. Story 17. I'm not a parent, rather the child, and I had this nanny, or yaya as we would call it. It became useless because she soon found out and kept unplugging the camera. It turns out she was slowly stealing money from my family. We fired her. Story 18. We once caught the nanny putting charcoal to feed them as a snack. This woman claimed that she thought it was a snack. It was in a charcoal box. My brothers were 4. Story 19. A little late to the party, but here goes. My mom suspected our maid of stealing the silverware, and she's just ducking nosy. Anyway, the maid was indeed stealing the silverware. I think that ended up being overshadowed by my dad having sex with her, though. Thanks for the gold! Who knew my dad's infidelity would one day pay off? Story 20. We have a nanny cam, and we caught our nanny dancing with our baby, making him laugh and giving him kisses. She's the best, and the cameras gave us the peace of mind to know she really treats him like her own. Story 21. Well, a case which happened near where I live. Woman used to work, husband out of country, had a 2-year-old kid. They hired a nanny to look after him during daytime. Day by day, kid started looking malnourished. So she set up a spy cam. Apparently, the lady used to bring her kid and feed him all the food left for the kid she was supposed to babysit. Then she would feed the kid cheap biscuits. She was promptly handed over to police. Story 22. This isn't something that I caught a babysitter doing, but I remember that I once saw, on TV, the case of some parents that went with her baby to the doctor because she cried a lot for apparently no reason. The doctor told them that she looked really stressed and asked them if they were doing something that could make her act like that. They didn't. Then the doctor and the parents noticed some really tiny dots in the girl's belly, and they had no idea where they came from. The babysitter told them that she had no idea, but they didn't believe her and secretly put cameras to spy what she was doing. Turns out that she was crazy. She was stabbing the baby with a needle from time to time and doing things like shaking her cradle incredibly hard to torment her. Of course, they called the police, confronted her, and she got arrested. Story 23. Wish I had a nanny cam. My stepsister was watching my brother with disabilities for me. She would dump out the contents of his capsules, meds, and use them later. Didn't find out about it till he started having seizures constantly and ended up in the hospital for the second time. Story 24. They are now 3 and 1.5 years old. I babysit my cousin 2 kids pretty much every other Friday night, so he and his wife can have some time alone and out of the house. Their kids are 2 and 6 months, so they have video monitors in each of their rooms, and I pretty much watch the monitors and read or watch TV. Roughly a month ago, I heard talking coming out of one of the monitors. It was a man's voice, and he kept saying over and over again, "It's okay, go back to sleep, I'm here." And I could see a figure standing over the crib in the 6-month-old's room. I freaked out thinking someone has broken it. They had a break-in around Christmas time and the guy was never caught. I called the police and my cousin and crept upstairs with a knife to protect myself and the babies. No one was upstairs and both kids were sound asleep. Needless to say, I was thoroughly freaked out until the police and my cousin came out. It didn't help that they lived in an older home and everything creaked. Fast forward to last week, the exact same thing happened to my cousin during the day while the kids are napping. But since it was daytime, the video monitor gave off a better picture of the room. Apparently, the one monitor in the 6-month-old's room switches over to the neighbor's monitor every once in a while. The voice I heard was that of his next-door neighbor soothing their crying baby who is around the same age. Story 25. I have rover sitters come in. Nothing weird, but honestly, if I pay you $30 to play with my dog for an hour, I expect more than you sitting on my couch and your phone while my dog tries to get your attention to play with him. Story 26. I travel the US for work, and am fortunate enough to be able to bring my 2 beagles with me. They have never been away from my side longer than the time I've been at work. They are 10 and 13. I have a camera that I use to check in on them sometimes, mostly because my larger beagle is quite the ingenious guy. Opening doors, scooting chairs over places so he can jump up onto the counters, etc., etc. Last year, I was in Oregon and had to go home to Michigan for an emergency. I do not fly with them, I will only drive, Will. So, I was in a pickle and reluctantly hired someone off of Rover that was willing to come stay over at my hotel room for 3 days. She was great, kept up on texting me about the dogs, said things like tossing them a ball right now, so I would check in via the cam when I thought it was appropriate. This woman was amazing. Not only was she playing with them enough to make them exhausted, she was even teaching them new tricks, making them use their brains to solve puzzles, and even got my 42-pound beagle to get up on her back so she could do push-ups. She was an avid CrossFitter. I was extremely happy. Story 27. I was the Ein caught in camera a few times. 1. A family who had bunnies caught me on camera booping noses to the beat of the song I was singing. Little bunny foo-foo hopping through the kitchen, picking up all the lettuce and munchy munchy munch. 2. A different family saw me get ducking tackled by their 95 pounds Mastiff puppy, and they immediately called me to make sure I didn't have a concussion since I just kind of laid there for a while. I was fine. I just got the wind knocked out of me. 3. Yet another different family saw me reading a book to their kids, and later complimented all the voices I make. I had no idea they could hear audio, and I got so embarrassed since I really did go all out. Story 28. The family I nanny for told me that their previous nanny got caught doing loads of awful things. The couple that outraged me most were 1. Leaving their 3-year-old daughter in the tub with water up to her chest for 2 hours every day while she sat in another room unable to see said child. 2. Once she went to run an errand with the same kid, and their doorbell camera caught her putting kid in car seat, not buckling her and peeling off. The mom said you could see toddler trying to buckle herself in before they took off. The camera was not in the bathroom. It was where they were able to see where the nanny was, room near bathroom, and their kid if the door was left open, which it always was while she was bathing. 2. They thought she was a perfectly good nanny until their kid was saying weird things that were going on, and they decided to watch the footage. They fired her after seeing what she was doing, and that's where I, super nanny, came in. The cameras weren't actually for the nanny. They were for their kid's therapists because she was prone to violent behavior, and they were trying to fix it. Story 29. What did our nanny do? Oh boy. About 2 years ago, after our son was born with some breathing issues. He has a rare form of dwarfism, and his airway is just smaller than most. We were issued a state-funded nursing. A nurse came at night to watch him overnight and make sure he was safe. At the time, he was very stable and really didn't need the nursing, but because he had a trach tube, so you legally need the nursing. He had, at the time, a tracheotomy tube. He was a little over 4 months old at the time of this incident. One night, I heard his oxygen monitor beeping, which was not unusual since it frequently malfunctioned. We had been so tired from getting up all the time from the beeping and stupid crap that the nurses would frequently do, so I didn't hear it for quite a while. These were not highly trained nurses. We had been getting very little sleep for months, very high stress. I walk in, and the baby is royal blue and lifeless, an image I will never be able to erase from my brain. The oxygen monitor says 20% oxygen. Normal would be 95 to 100%. I yell to my wife, who happens to be a surgeon, and she rushes in and we both start doing CPR on our kid. We call 911. The nurse is standing there just kind of staring the whole time. She didn't call 911. She didn't call us. I didn't understand what just happened. We do CPR for 15 minutes. No sign of life. The EMT get there and do CPR for another 12 minutes. At the end of the 12 minutes, they get some small signs of life and rush him off to the ER. My wife hops in the back of the ambulance and continues to do life-saving measures for the whole ride. At the hospital, they call a code and do life-saving measures for another 2 hours. He was in and out. When I got to the hospital, they brought over the chaplain and asked us these of end-of-life questions. He survived the whole ordeal, but suffered significant right and left-sided brain damage. He is 3 now and making great progress, but I believe he will never be the same. He doesn't talk yet, but is getting close. He says a few words. He is a good kid. Only a few days prior to the incident set up cameras in the room because the nurses seemed a little unsafe, but I had no choice. Long story there. I went back and watched the recorded video. Here's what really happened. The nurse, either on purpose or by accident, had taken the nebulizer machine, an air mister, to blow medicine into your airway, and in an attempt to give him his breathing treatment, accidentally or on purpose, attached it directly to his airway tract, meaning that instead of gently misting medicine into his airway, he had a strong burst of compressed air being forced into him. It punctured his lung, think a balloon being blown up and popping, and caused crepitus, air under the skin, and he was without oxygen for over 6 minutes. If it weren't for the nurse, he'd be fine. He was a stable kid who needed a little extra help in the beginning of his life to get to average. He was not a child on life support. His form of dwarfism is limiting, but oftentimes these kids have higher IQs than average, and we don't know why. Unfortunately, that won't be the case for him. If it weren't for my wife being a doctor and constantly saving lives, he'd be dead. Without question, she is a professional life-saving master. I knew CPR, but she knew exactly what to do to save his life and not to quit. We had a few extra life-saving things like an ambu bag, and we were able to save his life because of that. We sued the nursing company and won, of course. The money goes into an account to provide services for him for the rest of his life. After we are gone, we want to make sure someone will take care of him. The nurse did not get her license revoked. She is still practicing. We tried to appeal to the nursing board, but that was the result. Story 30. My grandpa was staying with my parents, but they figured it best to hire the regular sitter to watch my younger siblings overnight since they didn't think my grandpa was up to the task, and they were attending a wedding a couple hours away and made plans to spend the night in a hotel nearby. They had set up a nanny cam in a couple room, my siblings' bedroom, the master bedroom, living room, and kitchen, all motion activated. They normally wouldn't bother looking through the footage if everything seemed fine upon returning home and their master bedroom cam had never been triggered before. When they returned, they noticed that the cam in the master bedroom had been triggered, so they decided to take a look. Cut to footage of my grandpa and the sitter, both naked, aggressively making out from the entrance of the room, staggering while intertwined towards the bed, and then about 20 minutes of banging on my parents' bed. The sitter was about 20 years old, and my grandpa was around 70 at the time. My dad called me immediately after he saw the footage, laughing his ass off, and I could hear my mom crying in the background, completely mortified from what she had just witnessed, and shouting at my dad to throw out the sheets and kick out grandpa. My mom called the sitter to confront her, and she just apologized and said there was connection, or some crap to that matter. When she asked my grandpa what he was thinking, he just said, "At my age, you must seize every opportunity." I wish there was audio for the buildup. I lay awake at night sometimes, just wondering what kind of game my grandpa was talking to get in that sitter's pants. Story 31. I was the child, and there weren't any nanny cams. But my parents had left a small bucket of toys and things to keep me busy, and they hired a babysitter to watch me while they both had to take overtime at work and knew they would be gone most of the day. The babysitter moved that bucket of toys to another room, put me in a crib, and proceeded to go off and read or something, and left me there for hours with nothing to do, only coming back to check on me or feed me. My parents came back to me just sadly sitting in my crib. Story 32. I pay my neighbor to feed the stray cats in my garden when I'm away for days at a time, and the camera caught my neighbor trying to come in by pole, bamboo, vaulting one time. He nailed it amazingly. Story 33. This was my equivalent of pre-K. All the kids were regressing in their movement ability and getting really fat, so they set up spy equipment. Turns out one carer was doubling every baby's food portion and forcefully overfeeding them. Story 34. Person without kids here who plans to have kids. Parents, do you usually tell babysitters that you have a nanny cam installed? I'm curious and thinking about the potential legal and ethical implications both ways, and I'm guessing different states have different laws about recording persons without their consent. Story 35. Not a nanny cam, but the video baby monitor managed to catch our then 1.5-month-old projectile vomiting on me, and then straight up into the mouth and on the face of my husband 2 minutes later. Story 36. My mom put a nanny cam on my sister's bedroom. The only disturbing thing my mom allegedly saw was the babysitter crying while holding my sister. Turns out the babysitter just had a miscarriage the day before. Story 37. When I was around 12 years old, my parents caught my babysitter on camera stealing my NES games and shoving them into her pants and shirt. They confronted her about it, and she kept denying it until Ninja Gaiden fell out of her pant leg. My mom took her into a room and made take out all the games she stole. She literally had games shoved under the strap of her bra on her back so that she could sneak them out of the house, and others were put inside the waistband of her underwear. She must have really thought about this for a while. Anyway, we got the games back and she was sent home without pay. Story 38. Indoor cameras hooked up to the same unit as the outdoor cams. Husband was walking to his study, saw a giant huntsman spider, Australian here, and screamed like a little girl and jumped away. Needless to say, I bolted to the computer to watch the play back on repeat for a few minutes. I laughed so hard I had an asthma attack. I think that was the first time he ever called me a fool. Story 39. We have a nest in our kids' room and living dining. You can see partially into the kitchen from the living room cam, but not much. About the second week into using a new sitter, we catch her talking tons of crap about my wife and how she coddles our 18-month-old son. Bragged about how she was going to quit at the end of the day because she hates working for us and doesn't like our son. While she's in the kitchen, she puts him in his high chair and turns on an iPad for him to watch Elmo. No screen time allowed. He asks to get down and go play after a few minutes, and she says no. He starts to cry, and she basically yells at him. "Are you serious right now? You're so needy." So he cries harder. About 10 minutes later, she takes him back to his room where he calms down. I get home a few minutes later and send her on the way. Sitter: "Oh, you're home early? We had a rough morning, but we're feeling better now." Me: "Yeah, hey, you know that camera in the living room is on all the time, and I can hear everything you say and do in the kitchen, right?" She kind of stuttered, and I told her to GTFO. Then me and my kid hung out all day and had a blast. The thing that got me was being mean to my son, like he's not even 2 yet. Story 40? Not a nanny cam because this happened in the 90s, and I don't think we had them in Scotland then. But my mom came home early one day because she had become suspicious of our nanny as my sister, and I never slept after a day with her. She found both my sister and I in bed in the middle of the day. Turned out my nanny had been dosing us up with child medicine to make us sleep all day so she could sit and do nothing. Story 41. I have cameras all over the inside and outside of my house. It's standard with a Ring doorbell. Next came critter cams I put near my bird feeders. Then cameras everywhere. I used them mostly to look for the wild bunnies in my yard and to see the owl leave its roost at night. The indoor cameras are dog cameras. My wife and I use them to view and talk to our dogs while at work. The weirdest thing I've caught my dog doing: I had made a batch of Giddy, put it in a large Ziploc bag, and place it in the dining room table in preparation for a camping trip. My 19-pound Shih Tzu, which is large for a Tzu, was caught on video moving a dining room chair, jumping up onto it, then jumping onto the table. He ate the entire bag of Giddy, leaving only the bag. He did this in less than 10 minutes. Story 42. Not a nanny cam, but a vid. My Sil sat the camera down thinking she turned it off. I have over an hour of her teasing my toddler, in a mean way, with candy and popsicles. She started telling him that he would get some, then held it just out of reach. She then ate it in front of him. She was also calling him mean and weird names like Turd Muncher and Ricky Retardo. The camera got all the audio, but only some video. At the end of the video is when we got home. When I confronted her with the video, she started claiming I doctored it. I was a liar, an asshat, and hated her because she was prettier than my wife. She is not. That was the last time she was allowed around either of our kids unsupervised. She was the Sil for 10-ish years and is now the crazy Karen X Sil. I can't have a presence on social media because she attacks me all the time, says lies, etc. I'm also estranged from my brother because of her. 10 years of her warped his perception of our family. He still thinks some of the whacked out things she accused our dad, sister, other brother, and various other family members of. No reasoning has convinced him of the truth, not even the thought that if video evidence refutes some of the claims, then all can be considered suspect. I may get comments and advice of what I could do, but in the end, you can't fight crazy, and sometimes life is just not fair. The only thing I have done to make things better is ignore her. She eventually just starts attacking someone else, like an annoying yipping dog that just needs to annoy. As for my brother, I hope time will help to fix things. I also think that he might just be more like her than I think. Birds of a feather fly together. Story 43. Caught the babysitter doing herself good on our couch. The babysitter still is my female cousin. I figured the best thing was to just say nothing, save the awkwardness. She did it a fair amount. I then mentioned our house cam by accident some months later and her face dropped. I realized what I'd said then casually threw in that I'd never checked it, again, to save the awkwardness. Story 44. Not me. But my aunt and uncle had CCTV cams installed in the house. One of them caught their nanny abusing my toddler cousin and their 1-year-old or so baby. This was a few years ago. Luckily, they were young enough to not have very lasting memories. The parents sent them to experts for therapy sessions, so I hope there are little to no lasting damage. Story 45. Not my kids, but my sister's. This was when my nephew was still very young and my sister was still breastfeeding. Long story short, my sister caught the babysitter drinking her breast milk. She had her suspicions because my nephew would go through twice as much milk when the babysitter was taking care of him. My sister set up the camera and caught the guy in the act. Apparently, the guy was some sort of fitness nut and had read that breast milk can be very beneficial. As weird as it sounds, my sister ended up working out a deal with the guy. She got him to drop the price of watching the kid in exchange for a bit of breast milk every now and again. Story 46. Not the parent, but the kid. My Brazilian nanny didn't believe I had a kidney stone. Nearly died because she didn't speak English and refused to call an ambulance because she was embarrassed. Story 47. When she put my daughter down for her nap, she took a nap on the bed next to her. This isn't a bad thing at all. Different beds. 2-year girl who still needs a 90-minute power nap in the middle of the day. I just thought it was funny when I turned on the camera and saw them both napping. Story 48. No cams involved, but when I was a kid, my parents came home to the babysitter doing BJ her boyfriend. I guess she totally freaked out and was bawling, begging them not to tell her parents. They sent her on her way and never rehires, obviously. Story 49. We hired a dog sitter over the Thanksgiving holidays to check on the pooch, feed the cats, get the mail, etc. She asked if she could bring her sister along for company. We said sure, no problem. The sister, we found out in conversation, attends a nearby hyper-conservative fundamentalist school. When the hired sitter took the dog out and the fundy sister had the house to herself, she took the opportunity to scream, "Damn," at the top of her lungs a few times. Not a lot else. Just paced around the living room dropping high-decibel F-bombs. Gotta find some way to vent that fundy angst. Story 50. Not a parent and not a nanny cam, but my uncle once set up a wildlife camera, the ones that hunters use, to get a photo if something happened in my great-grandmother's apartment. She was very demented, so she told us incoherent stories about how there were people there, stealing all her liquor and chocolates. Turns out she was the one who stole the goodies. But we also found out her other son, my other uncle, who no one has contact with due to his shady actions with his wife, had a key to the apartment and was regularly visiting at midnight to steal some jewelry. Story 51. I was the babysitter. I used to look after the daughter of a couple who played tennis with my uncle. They were super rich and went out all the time. The kid would go to bed at about 7, then I would sneak a bit of booze from their well-stocked bar. I wouldn't drink it on the job, but I'd pour it into my water bottle to take to my next party. It happened on and off for about 3 years. Then one night, they must have changed their security system or something, and I got busted. They were very chill about it, seeing as I clearly didn't drink it while watching their kid, but told me they could get in trouble for supplying. Story 52. Once, at the very last moment, when no other babysitter was available, I hired one that is sort or notorious for not being good. Not dangerous or anything like leaving the child unattended, but like the type where she would not console the child if they were crying, punish them for doing small things. While away, I was very suspicious, so I continuously was glancing at the baby cam. The babysitter was playing with him, singing songs and completely engaging him well beyond the way you would expect somebody who was considered a bad babysitter to act. Essentially, what happened was the babysitter got hired by a crazy parent who didn't like her at all, so they spread a bunch of mumbo-jumbos through the neighborhood. When I came home, I gave her a very large tip, and she was the one I always hired whenever I needed a babysitter. Story 53. Caught my mother-in-law shaking my 3-year-old for wanting to play Ring Around the Rosie with her 2-year-old sister, pushed her for asking to read The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and called her a disgusting little pig for having an accident. 3-year-old has issues with UTIs due to her anatomy, which results in accidents. When I tried FaceTiming, she ordered my kids to ignore it and then tried claiming she's old and technologically illiterate when I called her on it. We never asked her to help watch the kids before that and haven't seen her since. Story 54. My babysitter is 100% cool. My husband's cat gets on the dining room table that she knows she is not allowed on as soon as she hears the car leave the driveway. Little snit. Story 55. Obligatory, not apparent, but part of my course training to be a childcare practitioner means we have to learn signs of abuse. We had to watch footage from nanny cams where the carers involved hit the children with large soft books so it wouldn't bruise, swung an infant by the ankles for crying, which is why we now check ankles for bruises. And one awful woman shook a baby who wouldn't go to sleep. The child now permanently mentally disabled. It made me sick to watch it. Story 56. Paid an employee to come over and let my dog out, feed her, and play with her while we were out of town. 1 hour tops, ended up with footage of him staying the night, sleeping in my bed, naked, and bringing over another dog he was dog sitting for someone else. Didn't know about that, which he let sleep in my bed with him. Worst part was that my dog didn't do well around other dogs she doesn't know. Poor girl was up all night stressed out by this intruder. Story 57. My friend's biodad has 4 kids through another relationship and a dog, and my friend told me this story. The kids are a 13-year-old, a 6-year-old boy and girl, and a 2-year-old. They had to go out of town a lot because my friend does swim and always have their sister do it, because the 13-year-old liked to play with knives. But she was sick, so they hire a 24-year-old carer. Their resume was good, prior experience, good reviews, etc. So they hire them. When he shows up, he's 6'4", easily 240 pounds, and wearing an Abercrombie beanie, lidded shades, crucifix earring, Atari t-shirt, leather jacket, black and red athletic pants, and Vans. He introduces himself and is nice and polite with excellent etiquette. He begins listing all the things he can and is willing to do. The wife is still nervous, though, as one would be, but they leave in an hour, so they can't do anything. They have a couple of nanny cams set up, so Dad says it's fine, and they leave after introducing him to the kids and the dog, and giving him a short list of chores. They get back, and he shakes their hand and leaves. They ask the eldest how it went, and he just says, fine, and goes back to playing video games. Similar response from the 6-year-olds. When they check the cams, they see this. He immediately starts doing the laundry, dishes, and setting out food for the dog. Then I'm going through this per child. He plays several different video games with the 13-year-old, and after some small talk, finds out that he loves to play cards, so they play Texas Hold'em for like an hour. For the 6-year-olds, he brushes the girl's hair and helps her do makeup and lets her do his. He has a little sister who loves makeup too. And for the boy, he watches the Star Wars prequels with him and quotes memes. And finally, plays with the baby for like hours, tosses her around and sings Schubert to her. To top it off, he gets McDonald's for everyone, and even slips the baby a few fries, and lets everyone play with the dog on the backyard. After putting the kids to bed, he lays on the couch with their Rottweiler, who usually hates strangers, and falls asleep watching Frasier reruns. They've hired him every time since and always pay him triple his rate, $5.45 an hour. Story 58. We have a Ring doorbell and we put out snacks for delivery drivers. My parents were in town and stayed a week over to sit out dogs while we went out of town for the week. We get notifications on our phones when the doorbell senses movement, of course. 2 or 3 times a day, the notification was my mother going out to the delivery driver's snack stash taking Little Debbie cakes. We had a good laugh about it, but never told my mom we knew. She gets embarrassed easily. However, same week we were gone. We also had recently put in a couple of inside cameras before we left. One is in our living room, facing the couch. It was new to us, so we were checking out the footage from our phones on and off a couple of times during the week. One time my diabetic dad was sitting on the couch binge eating the kids' Cheetos. My dad does not get embarrassed easily, so I had to say something over the two-way speaker. I said, "Hey Dad, last time I checked, those were not diabetic-friendly Cheetos." My dad replied, "You will need to buy more Cheetos." Love my dad so much. Story 59. Not my story, but a story my teacher, I'll call her Tina, shared about her children and their ex-nanny. So this nanny was a little older lady that had some medical issues, so she needed to bring her medication to Tina's house to take during the day. Tina was fine with this, but asked what type of medications they were just in case anything bad happened. But the nanny wouldn't tell her and said that it wouldn't happen, so she didn't need to know. Tina found this really weird, obviously. But she really needed this nanny, so she let it be for a little bit. After a few days, her son started complaining about a stomachache, and Tina just thought it was from eating too much candy or something, so she let it go. But then her son started to vomit and had a really high fever. She asked him if he had eaten anything weird, and he said no. Then she called the nanny just in case he didn't remember eating anything weird. On the call, the nanny said that she doesn't remember anything weird, but she wasn't sure. Tina decided to look through the nanny cam just in case he had gotten into something the nanny didn't know about. She didn't see him eating anything weird, but did see that the nanny had spilled her pills all over the floor earlier in the day, which she never mentioned. Then, Tina started to worry that her kid had gotten into some medication that she didn't even know the name of. As she was bringing her son to the hospital, she called the nanny and said that he had gotten into some of the spilled pills and just asked what pills she had spilled calmly. The nanny wouldn't tell her. Tina then asked her again, but less calm, but she still wouldn't tell her anything. Her reasoning was that Tina didn't need to know what meds she was taking and that it was too personal. While on the phone, Tina arrived at the hospital, and the doctor said he needed to know the medication so he could help the kid. The nanny still wouldn't say anything. Tina was now freaking out because her son could be dying and the nanny wouldn't say anything. The doctor then took Tina's phone and told the nanny that if she didn't tell him what medicine she spilled, that the child would die. The nanny said it was Benadryl. That's what she was so upset about Tina knowing. The kid was allergic to Benadryl. Tina hadn't known this yet, and had eaten so much of it that he got sick. Story 60. There are cameras around my grandmother's house. She has dementia and is taken care of by nurses. One beat her up for a whole minute. Nurse knew there were cameras and didn't care. Obviously got fired. Story 61. Wow, a question I can actually answer. Less than a month ago, my coworker was notified that his child was crying. I guess his cams are some high-tech cry-detecting crap. One of his nannies said nothing had happened, so he checked the cam, which he showed us during lunch. The nanny, recently hired, was just chilling with his 3-year-old and 1-year-old when the 1-year-old got close to the edge of the bed. The sitter just sat there watching while the kid slowly crawled closer and closer towards the abyss. She did nothing, and the kid fell pretty hard. Surprise, surprise. My coworker questioned the nanny again, who knew there were cameras, and she denied being responsible for the fall. He told her to pack up her things and leave. It was pretty cringe, watching her just look at the kid get hurt. Like any human would instinctually know danger was approaching. Story 62. Not a nanny and no cameras. But a few years ago, we had a cleaning lady who was in her early 30s. We usually had older ones. IDKA why we changed. Anyway, for context, my mother has a lot of cess cords, and some of them are quite expensive. She keeps those in her closet, and out-of-season ones in the C-Court cupboard in the basement. One day, she noticed a couple of pairs went missing. At first, she asked me if I took them. We have similar taste in cess cords and same cess cord size. But after us searching the entire house, my mom realized the cleaner must have stolen them. Not one pair, but 3. My mom asked her if she'd seen them because she couldn't find them. And sure enough, they appeared the next time she was there. Then my mom confronted her and she said, "You have so many cess cords, I didn't think you'd notice." So I took them to wear them for some events I had. Needless to say, she was fired. Story 63. My neighbors were checking in on our cats once every day while we were on holiday. And if you know anything about cats, it's that they don't need light to see. We check on our home security in the morning for any deliveries, etc., and notice the light on, so we look from a few other POVs. And it turns out our neighbors had turned all our lights on. I gave them a quick text, and apparently they turned the lights on so the cats could see. That holiday cost too much in electricity bills. Story 64. Not parent, but like others have a cam for dog. Our house sitter turned our house into a laundromat for their cleaning business. Left my dog outside for 2 hours alone, pacing back and forth. Cold, and dog is short hair, no undercoat. And lied to my in-laws to their face on camera about the long walks they go on, that were only actually 6 minutes. He needs an hour at minimum. They knew we had cams outside. Wished I would have had one on inside, but I was trying to give them privacy because we used them pre-camera and trusted them. Being out of country, I understandably lost my crap. Fired them as soon as we could get someone actually dependable, and time difference made things horrible. Sleuthing to figure out what was going on didn't help. Makes me sad someone would not take care of my dog. That's what we paid you to do. Idiots. Story 65. I caught my house pet sitter smoking in my house. Cloves. Ugh. On my front door camera. She walked outside multiple times while smoking a cigarette, then denied it when I confronted her. Idiot. The whole house smells like from ashtray. Story 66. My pet sitter is my best friend. My dogs know the sound of his car turning into the neighborhood, which is a quarter mile from my house. The dogs start barking excitedly when they hear his specific car. Dogs are crazy. Story 67. Not me, but a family friend. I used to live in a tropical region when I was really young. My friend parents got a nanny for both their daughters. The younger child was around 2, 3 years old when it started. The nannies there are basically live-in maids, and once a year they would go back home for a month or so. So when my friend's parents would go out for work, they would be alone with the maid. The maid would, to avoid babysitting, put a huge ant on my friend so that it bites her, and she cries herself to sleep. And the maid would go around the neighborhood frolicking with her boyfriend. It kept happening for a few years until one day, the maid eloped with her boyfriend when her acts were caught. I can't remember how she got caught. But yeah, my friend developed a lot of issues and had to deal with it till her late teen years. She came from a conservative family, so of course therapy was never considered. Story 68. My friend is a nanny, and sometimes she takes the small human. She watches and has her dance for the parents randomly in front of the camera, or waves since it is a Google Hub and has photos of the parents. Small gifts for the parents to find if they review the video from that day. Story 69. Not me. But when my friend and I went to the beach, her parents hired a dog sitter to come by every night. Their dog had an obsession with hiding old food in the couch and destroying couch cushions, so she was not allowed on the couch. They caught the dog sitter letting the dog on the couch with her and actually patting the couch to let her up there. Story 70. I once house sat for a friend and wasn't told she had a camera in her living room. I didn't notice till a day or two in, and I'm sure she has footage of me picking my nose. I don't care if you want a camera in the house. Just let me know so I don't do dumb stuff like that. Story 71. Rolling around on my bed, not laying, like rolling as a pig would roll in mud. So weird. Sue weird. Locking the second nanny in a bathroom on purpose for 20 minutes listening to her scream while binge eating from my pantry. A few others. Story 72. Not me, and not a babysitter, but my mom's friend was getting her house decorated by this painter. Since her and her husband would be at work all day, they put all the valuables in their bedroom and set up nanny cams around the room. Anyway, one day the husband gets this notification of movement from the cameras. He pulls up the footage, and this painter is in their bedroom. The painter proceeds to get fully undressed and lie in the middle of their bed and start doing himself good. Needless to say, the husband went straight home and fired him. I'm guessing he finished. About 5 minutes later, the decorator texts him, "Can I just ask why you fired me?" And the husband obviously replies, "Because you've just had this in my bed." To which the painter replies, "Okay, no worries, I won't charge you for today's work." Story 73. Not on camera, but my friend returned home from work early one day and found the au pair wasn't home. No biggie, probably out for a walk with the kid. She went to use the downstairs bathroom and found a positive pregnant test. My friend left it there, acted like she didn't see it, but started looking for a replacement au pair just in case. Sure enough, the au pair mysteriously packed up and left the country with her boyfriend without saying a word. Story 74. I bought one to keep an eye on the cats when we drove to see the eclipse and visit my fam a couple years ago. My one cat figured it out and would sit there having random conversations with me, rubbing his face on it. It really entertained my family. Got a ping during the eclipse, seems he was seriously concerned about the planet. I could see my ancient cat running laps in the background while Smart Cat was giving me a rundown. The third cat was mysteriously absent. Story 75. Ours caught our nanny stealing money from our vacation fund. She also left our 9-month-old sitting on the counter as she walked away. Later that day, it caught a phone call about buying substances, how much, the dealer's name, and a bunch of other stuff. It turns out she had cleared out our 4-year-old's piggy bank of $115, took money and gift cards from my wife's purse, stole my gold wedding ring, I wear a silicone one most days, and a bottle of hydrocodone. I provided the evidence to the police, and she was caught. She was found guilty in January. She'd only worked for us for a few weeks. Story 76. Not a nanny cam, but a camera in my sister's room when she was a toddler. She had a habit of getting out of her toddler bed. So me, my dad, and my mom would watch it, and every time she got up, we'd all say, "Go back to bed, Serena." It was funny to see her reaction. Story 77. I used to manufacture and sell nanny cams, covert surveillance systems, among other devices. Most of the stuff caught has been employees having sex with other employees or employee theft from cash registers. If you're wanting to buy a nanny cam to catch your spouse doing something wrong, be ready to see the truth, and chances are, you don't need to buy one to know it's happening. Story 78. I nannied for a family in college. The dad was very attractive, and all my friends used to joke about how jealous they were that I got the job and about me becoming a stepmom, and they were all very curious to know what his wife looked like. He had a reputable medical practice in the area, so they all knew what he looked like from there. One night, after putting the kids to bed, I was walking down the hall and passed a huge family portrait. So I took out my phone and snapped a pic to show my friends what she looked like. Then, just for laughs, I posed in front of her like I was the mom in the photo and sent that. They never said anything, but I remembered later that they had a camera that faced directly into that hallway. I had anxiety about that for the remainder of my career with them, although they were cool and probably would have just laughed it off if they saw it and assumed I had some schoolgirl crush on the dad. I actually loved and had a great relationship with the mom, so I don't think she would have thought I was being serious or anything. Still, it was super embarrassing, and I've never fully gotten over that. Story 79. A colleague of mine saw that when his 8-month-old baby cried, the nanny just ignored him and kept watching reality TV, not paying any attention to him while he bawled his eyes out. She did not attempt to console him or anything. She just tried to hear the TV. There were a few other troubling instances too, like she'd say they went on a brief stroll but disappeared for hours with no explanation. Or she didn't follow the parents' instructions on how to put him to sleep and let him cry. And my colleague realized that the baby was anxious and desperate every time the nanny arrived. Heartbreaking, really. Story 80. I have been caught on one. But it wasn't bad, just a little embarrassing because I didn't know them well at all. A family I was dog sitting for the first time wanted me to stay at their house. They had a camera in the kitchen above cabinets, where you can also see the living room, that I did not know about. Apparently, they could see me come in from work or errands, and every time I did, I'd just drop everything and lay on the floor and play with pups and provide belly rubs. 3 German Shepherds and a Doberman, just absolute angels. They also appreciated all the songs I made up and sang to the dogs when it came to feeding time, along with all the songs I made up and sang while just walking around the place in general. They thought it was hilarious. I'd tell the dogs all about my day. I'm glad they left out the parts of dance moves I did. Definitely not wearing pants one day when I had to run from bathroom to dryer to get them, or the multiple farts I ripped on their couch. Story 81. We had a nanny that locked our 2-year-old in her room and didn't pick up our 5-month-old for 4 hours. She even propped a bottle up with pillows to feed him. We had a live stream to our phones. I was away visiting foster kids for work and was 2 hours away from home. My husband alerted me to the situation, and I drove home immediately. He and his coworkers watched live as I fired her on the spot. I think he was making sure I didn't kill her. I was a social worker at the time and had seen much worse, but I'm glad my intense paranoia from all the horrific abuse and neglect I had seen made me get the camera. I quit working not long after that. I've been home for 9 years. It could have been much worse, but it was enough for me. If anyone is going to screw up my kids, it's me. Story 82. I'm glad I stopped babysitting before cameras became a thing. A couple I sat for had adorable kids, but the dad had one room in the house devoted to a full model railroad setup, dozens of trains, bridges, teeny villages, the works. After they went to bed, and during that long, boring stretch before the parents came home, I'd just play with the train set. Only regret is that I couldn't toot the horns because the kids would have busted me. Story 83. One of my exes and her mom had to leave town for a week, and they had 3 cats. One only had 3 legs because he got hit by a car, poor timid little thing that hit all the time and refused to come out, and a dog that had diabetes. They hired someone just to come over once in the morning and once at night to feed, let the dog out, and give the dog his medicine. They had cams, I'm not sure why they put them in place, and found that the guy stayed there all day just playing with the animals, and even got the timid cat to come out and cuddle with him. They showed me the videos of him arriving, and all of their pets rushing to the door to meet him. Story 84. Started working from home. Office is on the 3rd floor. Hired a nanny for when wife is at work. Install cameras in every room in the 1st floor the day before the nanny started. The first day, 2 hours after she arrived, she put my child on the floor. She later told me it was to stretch her bones. Looked directly into the camera and took both of her breasts out. She put them back in her shirt and walked out of the room briefly. 5 seconds later, she pops back in front of the den camera, rubs her hands between her breasts and starts rubbing it on the doorframe. TV. Everywhere. I was upstairs working. Wife called me explaining she checked the camera when she got to work and what she saw. I immediately confronted the nanny. She said her breasts were itchy and apologized. Told her to go home. The nanny was a 60-ish-year-old retired police officer from my town. There is no way I'm hiring another nanny. Story 85. When I was around toddler age, I stopped having babysitters after my parents came home to me crying in my buggy that was left in the corridor by the front door. My parents then found the babysitter with another person who were eating all the food out the fridge. My safety was one issue, but my parents were both out working. We couldn't afford to lose all that food. I think it stopped them from going out to have breaks too. Story 86. We didn't have any security cams or nanny cams. My mom hired a nanny, and after about 2 days, my family was complaining to my mom about how she locks our dog outside all day. My mother never believed that we were telling the truth, just because we didn't like her. One day, I set up my laptop with my webcam to record breakfast time. When my mom got home that evening, I showered her the recording of the nanny locking the dog outside multiple times after I let the dog back in. Safe to say she was fired that same night. Her reasoning was, dogs belong outdoors only. Also turned out she brought my younger siblings underwear every day and took them home to be washed, that she bought. Story 87. My aunt caught her nanny doing the nanny's laundry. All of it, including what she was wearing at the time, meaning that she sat her naked butt on couch to watch TV while the machine was running without even having the decency to put a towel down. Gross. Story 88. Late to the party. Mom hired friend of sister's to watch dog while we left for a weekend. Girl didn't know we had cameras. Everything seemed fine when we got back. Checked cameras for something else unrelated. Then realized this girl didn't even show up more than once. Our dog sat for 48 hours without anyone checking on him or feeding him or letting him outside. It's a miracle he didn't crap in the house. Poor thing was such a good dog. The whole family was pissed, but didn't want to confront her to reveal we had cameras. It was decades ago when it was really rare to have home cameras. Still bitter this idiot got paid. Story 89. I'm not a parent, but when I was younger, they went on a trip around the country and left me with a babysitter. For 2 weeks at 8 p.m., I was off to bed. I was asleep when this would happen, but at 9 on the dot, babysitter would poke her head in the room to see if I was sleeping. Now, point of note, my parents had a security system in every room of the house. Babysitter only knew about the one in my room dot, so when her boy toy came over every night at 10, she had no idea my parents had footage of them doing the dirty on my grandmother's couch. Story 90. I have a nanny cam for the purpose of creeping my dog while I'm at work, but it's how I discovered my former superintendent was coming into my apartment randomly to steal a nug from my jar of WD. Story 91. I'm an electrician. I did a service call for a family that I've known for a long time. I had no idea I was being filmed as I was chasing their dogs around the house as they would take my tools. I would catch them and roll around the floor for a minute or so, then go back to work. I probably spend more time with the dogs than I did working. Story 92. I had a camera in my apartment to watch my dog while I was at work. One day, maintenance came by to fix the drain in the tub. Then he sat at my computer and started trying to log into it, looking in drawers and generally invading my privacy. My camera lets me talk through it, and I was watching this unfold live. I hope you're comfortable in my chair trying to access my computer. You should probably go tell the management to expect a phone call and a video email. Story 93. No nanny cam. Because it was the late 70s, but my mother came to get me early, unannounced, from the sitter and found me tied to a chair in the kitchen, alone, with the babysitter in the backyard with her own kid in a baby pool, having a grand old time. My mother is not a violent person, but she was that day. Story 94. We have a Nest Cam, but not for a nanny. It's just to check on our son when he naps, and in the middle of the night so we don't wake him. My mother nannied for years. When interviewing, she would always ask the parents to put in a camera if they didn't own one. She never asked if they had one. She wanted them to have a way to feel at ease by watching her if they felt they needed to. She also wanted them to have cameras so, in case anything happened, the parents would know it wasn't abuse or mistreatment. It was an insurance policy both for her and the parents. Story 95. Not a parent or a babysitter, but similar. My family set up a camera when we noticed my late grandmother's pain medication bottles were running low too quickly. We thought maybe my cousin, who had a back injury and was staying in the house, was taking them and forgetting, but he insisted he was only taking ibuprofen. The camera caught my grandma's home help aide going into the cabinet and skimming several pills, which she'd been likely doing once or twice a week for months. She also nosed through the drawers and cabinets a bit, seemingly looking for money. We showed the video to the agency and told them their services were no longer required. Story 96. Our neighbor's pet sitter dressed up their pit bulls and hosted a dinner party for them while binge-watching Downton Abbey. She gave them each their own voice as well. The male sounded like Robert Kennedy with a head cold, and the female like an Australian Queen, Elizabeth. They talked crap about my dog and ate a box of Ritz crackers. Story 97. I was a nanny in college. I'd occasionally take a couple of the kids' probiotic gummy vitamins. I always felt so scandalous. The vitamins were delicious. Story 98. My parents foster kittens and have a live feed camera in the room where the kittens roam around. One night, a woman accidentally broke into our house, drunk on substances, thought it was her boyfriend's house, and walked into the kitten room. The camera footage is just of her squealing over the phone to her boyfriend, "Oh, name, there's kitties," and then talking to the kittens in the most non-malevolent drunk girl voice. Story 99. I once got caught on a nanny cam trying to subtly wake the baby up so I could have baby cuddles. It was my friend's baby. She thought it was absolutely hilarious. She watched me for about 45 minutes, try to carefully throw toys around the room so it didn't wake the baby up too loudly. And then, once she was finally awake, I cuddled her for a bit till she went back to sleep. Seriously embarrassing stuff. Story 100. My aunt has security footage of their dog sitter fully naked, just chilling around their house. They found out she's a whole nudist. They still use her. They just get a kick out of knowing that some college girl just hangs out naked at their house when they go on vacations. Story 101. No nanny cam, but my cat camera. I was at work and watched the police kick in my apartment door. My downstairs neighbor with PhD had an episode and called the cops saying I was screaming for help. That was fun. Story 102. My mom used it to catch my dad receiving BJ from the sitter. She'd suspected it for months, but we didn't believe her. Then she put it on the TV so everyone could see after my little sister birthday party when just the adults were around. It turned out that after it all came out, the sitter was busted giving BJ to 3 other dads in the neighborhood. My dad ended up getting an apartment with her, but then she went away to college and he lives by himself. Story 103. Not a parent and didn't catch a babysitter, but when I was a kid 22 years ago, my brother and I were both on Adderall. My mom noticed our stash depleting. After putting a hidden camera in the living room, we caught our neighbor lady sneaking into our house and stealing our meds. It was pretty shocking since we lived in a pretty nice neighborhood in the suburbs.